all eyes are on the impending development of Tropical Depression 9, soon to become Tropical Storm and later Hurricane Ian. Space launch Delta 45 has entered Hurricane Condition 5, indicating surface winds in excess of 50 knots, or 58 miles per hour, could arrive in the area of Patrick Space Force Base and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station within 96 hours. NASA officials at today's Artemis press briefing said they are closely monitoring the forecast. Some listeners interpreted the occasionally vague answers to questions about rolling the rocket back to the VAB as indicating a reluctance to abandon the Tuesday launch attempt unless it was very clear that a nearly direct hit was being forecast. The fact that the live stream on YouTube was interrupted during the question portion of the briefing only served to heighten confusion about the rollback decision. Nonetheless, NASA is apparently making early preparations, and it is reported that the crawler transporter will be heading to the Pad 39B area this evening. A decision on rollback could come no later than Saturday afternoon. If the agency decides to keep the SLS rocket in place, they hope to aim for launch on Tuesday, having expressed satisfaction with the results of the tanking test this week. It was also disclosed, upon questioning, that the Eastern Range has granted NASA the necessary waiver on the flight termination system to allow the next two attempts. Unfortunately, Dr. John Blevins refused to provide any information on the data that supports the extension, claiming that it would be, quote, silly, unquote, since there are too many parameters to make any sense of it. Even if conditions are safe enough to avoid rollback, it seems highly unlikely that weather would permit a launch on the 27th. By keeping Artemis on the pad, the final opportunity to fly during this period, which comes on Sunday, October 2nd, would be preserved. Follow WSN on Twitter for updates on this evolving story.
And it was very interesting. I think we learned a lot. We accomplished all our primary objectives for the crowd demonstration test. We were able to look at the loading operations. We made a tweak in that, and I think we were successful after that. We did the kickstart. We did the pre-press, and we did a chill down, a stable replenish. And then during all those events, we actually monitored the vehicle and adjusted a few parameters, and that was all actually very successful.
And Tom, just to add to that, so, why is it Plan A? Well, the cryo test was a success, right? So, in other words, we've got a launch vehicle that is ready to go. And so if we have an opportunity, we would like to launch it on Tuesday. Right now, we don't have a forecast that shows us with winds gusting higher than 74 knots coming across the Kennedy Space Center. So that's our Plan A. But we know we got to pay a lot of attention to it, and we know we got to get the decision right. So we are going to be, again, iteratively collecting that data and then collectively making that decision. And whether it's tonight or whether it's tomorrow, it's going to be data-based, and it's going to be to protect the hardware and to protect this program that we're a part of. But ideally, we're calling it Plan A because the cryo test was a success, and right now we don't have a forecast that violates our weather criteria.
But right now, we're mostly focused in on really kind of getting smarter about the weather. I'm not from Florida. Mike is, and so I'm from Washington, D.C., and the way we track weather in Washington, D.C. is we pick up the Washington Post in the morning, we see if it's going to rain this day. And so I actually am always amazed when I'm down here. These folks spend a lot of time here in Florida understanding weather patterns and predictions and directions, and there's different models that they follow, and there's just a lot of information to digest. It's still a tropical depression number 9. It's not a named storm. We really want to continue to try to get as much information as we can so we can make the best possible decision for the hardware. And that's why we're going to wait. We'll have another conversation at 5 today, and we're just kind of taking it a step at a time. But I don't know, Mike, I think that's probably, you've been in here for a long time, that's pretty much standard practice for how we handle these situations.
So let's see, as far as staying at the pad, the wind, we want to see peak winds, less than 74 knots, and that's kind of the key requirement that we're tracking. Again, the rollback would be forecasted sustained winds less than 40, so that's something that we're paying attention to also.
We've got a robust design, but we want to protect the vehicle, and so we're just going to look at what the forecast is and the assurance, the percent likelihood of that forecast, and certainly we'll have to make a decision over the next 24 hours.
These vehicles, if you have a higher wind, less than the criteria, that we will keep it at the pad. That's a standard practice. for the industry. It's not something you roll back just to roll back. It's we really will look at the weather conditions and make a good decision based on the information we have. And right now it's just too early. All we can tell you is what we know, which is we're going to take another look at 5 and we'll see what we got.
The 74 knots and 40 knots, those are gusts, not sustained winds, right? And then the second question, I guess, is maybe for Tom or John. The earliest reasonable arrival of tropical storm winds at Kennedy Space Center is sunrise on Tuesday. That's from the National Hurricane Center. So you're saying you just need 3 days, right, to go from tanking and launch configuration to reaching the inside of the VAB? And, if that's on that timeline, your people would be exiting KSC in potentially tropical storm conditions. So I'm just wondering, if tropical storm force winds potentially are there by Tuesday morning, are you really leaving yourself enough time with 3 days from making the decision potentially tomorrow, mid-morning, late afternoon, or afternoon?
Hey, this is John Blevins, Eric. On the first one, there is a mixture. No, Mike got it right on the winds there. It is peak gust for the 74.1 at the pad, but it's sustained on the rollout, and those are knots, not miles an hour. And so, the 74.1, just to let you know where that comes from, it comes from the 180-day winds that we record over decades here at the Cape, and it's referenced to a 60-foot high level. And so, no, Mike got that right earlier when he said 74.1 gusts, and then 40 knots sustained on the rollback. We're certified for those. And you could actually slow down the vehicle and probably do more wind on the way back, but we don't want to do that analysis. We want to stay within the parameters that we've kind of set for that.
And then on the second part of the question, it's a delicate balance, right? Earliest possible, perhaps is Tuesday. I think more likely, if in fact this comes at us, the more likely is something along the lines of late Tuesday or Wednesday. We don't want to roll back if we don't have to, and so clearly the uncertainty of this storm makes this a difficult decision and makes the timing difficult as well. It may be that when we get to the 5 o'clock forecast tonight and we look at the forecast, that we feel it's the time to pull the trigger and to go ahead and put the rollback in motion. We hope it's not. We hope that we're going to continue to feel like we've got some more time and that we can push the decision to Saturday morning. Obviously, the safety and health of our workforce is really important to us, and that's a factor in this decision that we make. So clearly, it's not simple. We would like to stay out there, and we were hopeful that, within this launch period, we're going to get another launch attempt, and that's why we're watching the weather so closely.
First of all, on the rollback, we've talked a lot about rollback, and I think I've expressed my desire not to do too many rolls, just because it is a broadband, a little bit of shaking. Vehicle's certified for more rolls. If we need to do that, we're going to do that. There won't be any, we're going to make a good technical decision on that based on the data, as Mike has said and Thomas said. But if we have to roll back, as far as, yes, we had a great tanking test. I don't think we should take anything away from that. It's another data point, certainly, if we roll back and forth and reconnect to the propellant lines. As far as the umbilical plate itself, where we replace the seal and everything, it stays in that position. I'm not overly concerned. I don't have that data. Let's just be clear. It's still a machine, and there are parameters that we're learning, and I don't think that the roll itself, looking at the frequency of that roll and look at the umbilical and its sensitivity, I don't think it'll have any effect. It's not on. Until you asked, it wasn't a big issue. We have talked about it, but it's not something that's specifically on my radar per se as a concern on rollback or rollout. I think the main thing for me is that we did have a great test. That we did meet all our objectives, both primary and secondary, and we understand how that seal works. And I think that is the reasons that we were having the issue, not anything from rollout or rollback. But it's a good question. And certainly if we have to roll out and roll back, there'll be some things that we do change, just some life-limited items that will be coming up in that case. But I'm not concerned about the leak with the roll per se. But good question, Emory. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Tom. Just to add to John's thing, if we do go back to the VAB, we will take that opportunity. We got to do some battery charging. We'll retest the FTS system. We'll do some stuff like that. So it will replace the battery on it. So we have some known things that we will do if we go back into the VAB. And so that's just to be clear, that's what we would do.
Okay, thanks. Our next question is from Emily Speck with Fox Weather. Hey there. My question is for John or maybe Mike. Is there any scenario where it's better to leave SLS at the pad, like even through a tropical storm and a hurricane? You know, you're talking about 74 knots. Like, what is the max that you would potentially want to do that for?
Hey, Emily, you know, it's a really good question. Actually, we're in the middle of conversations about what the best thing to do for the rocket is and hitting the launch opportunity and all of those things, both technical and programmatic, and balancing those. You know, we do have a certified design with factors of safety to those peak gusts at the 60-foot level, and you probably know as well as anybody how that's generated. We have a conservative parabolic profile where all of the 180-day winds fall within that parabolic profile that we apply all the way up the vehicle. So those aren't just 74.1 knots at the 60-foot level. They're very high. I'd have to look it up to see what they are at the top of the vehicle when we evaluate that, and we're certified with factors of safety to do that. You know, I think, and of course, that's primary loads. You know, your risk could be other things that might be moving around in a storm like that. And so if we actually experience a true hurricane, it'd be my recommendation, you know, that we consider rolling back. Usually the footprint of those things isn't as wide, you know, for those high winds. And so I think really this forecast is really very important to us that we're going to be trying to get more detail on over the next 12 to 24 hours. But ultimately, we have a pretty robust vehicle, and we'll just have to keep looking at that forecast to see if we fall within our certified parameters. Mike?
Yeah, hey, Emily, the first thing I would say is maybe you can help us out with this. We're really looking for that forecast that's going to tell us.
Everybody online has better weather data than we do. It was just we're going to get a really good, highly technical forecast at 5 o'clock. So we'll
and you know, kind of just kidding, but you know what? And I think everybody recognizes that the forecast did change from Wednesday to Thursday to Friday, and so when we woke up this morning and the tracks looked worse than they had the previous 2 days, you know, it really caused us to start to take a long, hard look at exactly what the right decision is, and that's what we're trying to do today. Hopefully, you know, we have seen some trending of the storm, and you know it better than I do, but we've seen some trending of it moving west to east. So, you know, a lot of the models early on showed us going into the Gulf, and they were fairly disparate. We've seen over the past 2 days it moved further to the east. And again, as you know better than I know, until that storm is formed, until we really know where that center is, and until we understand the timing of that trough, there's an uncertainty. If it continues to trend to the east and it curves, and basically, you know, we stay on the left side of the storm and it cuts through lower on South Florida, we're going to be in a lot better position. And so, you know, if you were tracking stocks or if you're tracking storms, you've seen this move to the east a couple days in a row. And so maybe we'll see some more of that over the next several hours. And again, very dependent on the forecast that we got at 11, which I haven't seen yet, and the thing that we'll get at 5 o'clock, and we'll make the best risk-informed decision, like John Blevins said, based on technical, based on programmatic, and really, you know, at the end of the day, we know we've got to protect this incredibly valuable asset, and we'll do that.
I'll try to answer the first one. I think you were talking on shuttle, the locks and LH2 disconnect towers were connected to the mobile launcher for both commodities. So when you rolled off the pad, you disconnected there. So once everything else stayed connected when you rolled back to the VB. So once you did that and rolled back out, you would have to go ahead and sample the G and 2 helium commodities and then go ahead and redo dew points and things like that before you reconnected. And that took time, as well as do all the electrical connections and umbilicals and things like that. So it took basically reperform your pad validations, which was a day and a half or so of work. So anytime once you disconnected and rolled back to the VB, there was a amount of work you would do there. And as far as the second question on 8-inch QD, the leak signature we saw the second time was different than the first. So totally different signatures. It was also, again, manageable by the way that we controlled the loading. So again, I'm not sure if it was who asked the question earlier. No, we have requirements and specifications and launch commit criteria and things, and that we live by on all these things. So rarely do you get a pristine, perfect system that has from a fluid standpoint, that has no leakage. So throughout the shuttle program, again, I go back on my history, on LH2 systems, we had leakage pretty much every single mission, and you never heard about it because it never violated constraints and never made the headlines. But we'd have 500 parts per million or 1,000 parts per million, and some weren't reported because it never exceeded the limit to report, and some were reported. We took non-conformances, but never exceeded safety plans and things like that. So we'll monitor the system, and if it exceeds requirements, we'll report them and respond accordingly. But John, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but.
No, Brad, I don't have anything to add. Good detail.
I guess this is Mike Bolger. One other part of the question that you asked about, again, were, what are the things that you can do to get ready? And just a couple things kind of come to mind. We asked our crawler team, hey, let's go make sure we're ready to go. Let's start thinking about when we got to position that crawler, when we want to roll it out towards the launch pad. So they're in the process of doing that. We're taking a look at the condition of the crawler way, making sure it's all ready to go. And so the team is looking at that. And the other things we're talking about are, can we do hurricane preps across other facilities around Canada, get those done early and kind of behind us before you might normally even get into them based on the hurricane conditions, so that we can free up as many resources as possible for the actual rollback opportunity and basically compress that timeline and get it done even faster than we otherwise might have. So we are taking a look at things we can do to kind of get ahead of the game, if you will.
We'll be from Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. I was wondering if Dr. Blevins could talk a bit more about how it is that the Space Force was convinced to extend the battery limit. It was a 20-day limit, and you got it extended to 25, and now it's been extended for basically 3 or 4 weeks past that. So what was it that set the 20-day limit, and how were you able to convince the Space Force that, in fact, it's good for many weeks past that? And is this a precedent now? Does this mean that for future launches that use that battery that you no longer will have the 20-day limit?
Marcia, those are kind of insightful questions. Let me just say the Space Force owns the mission and the analysis, and we do the analysis they request as well as a lot that they do. And so they've done that analysis, and they have confidence in our system for this time. I don't want to go into any details because it's just not pertinent here. To give those kind of details and would be silly because there's just too many parameters that they look at for anybody to take that information and try to correlate it to anything that makes sense to them. So I'll just say that they've worked with us all along. This is not the first time that we've been working with them. We worked not just during the shuttle program, but on this program for years. So they're involved in evaluating our design, our qualification batteries, in the testing that we do. They sit on console with us, and so they're part of our team. And so they have an incredible mission, and they do a good job at it. And I'm really glad that we had enough information to provide the public safety assurance that they get to grade. And so that's all I've got to say about the FTS.
Our pre-planned approach for hurricane rollback, we do not desurface the HPUs. There's 4 gallons of hydrazine in each one of the power units that we use to power the hydraulics and the boosters, and those will stay in the vehicle as we roll back into the VAB. In terms of our ability looking forward, I don't think we know yet in terms of what our schedule would be looking forward. Like I said, we've got to sort through. We're going to do the FTS battery change out. We're going to do some other battery charging activities. So we'll lay that out when we make a decision to actually roll back into the VAB. And so after that, we'll have a better idea of what our trip back to the pad would look like and what kind of dates we would target for that. Right now, we're literally mostly focused on the current weather reports. We have a lot, the agency has, and the folks here have a lot of practice on really working through those forecasts, working closely with our weather office, and then if we have to move up a decision because of a change, we'll move up the decision. If we have a little bit more time for a decision, we'll take a little more time for the decision. But this is actually fairly standard. I mean, I did the shuttle program for a long time, so I've watched this for myself. I watched it for quite a while, and we're following the normal procedures, and we'll absolutely make the right call with this vehicle. And we feel that this afternoon we'll have another conversation on that. We're in constant communication with the folks. Mike and Charlie and team are in constant communication, and we just I wish we were better at predicting weather absolutely 5 days in advance, and if I did, I would pretty much quit this job and go work for the Weather Bureau. But there's still some uncertainties in the forecast, and therefore we want to make sure we have an ability to get a little bit better definition. And then when we get that definition, we'll make the right call. I don't think Mike, have it. That's it.
Stocks tanked yet again today, and all but one of the WSN Space stock watchlist shares fell. The biggest losers were AST Space Mobile, Oceaneering International, Terran Orbital, and Astrotech. Here's hoping for a better week next week. Reporting from cyberspace, this is correspondent Karen Calvis.